Hi, I'm Emily, and I live in a quiet suburb with my mother, Linda. But she's not just any mom. She's a renowned surgeon. Life has been all about overcoming the odds, especially since my dad passed away unexpectedly. Linda raised me on her own, navigating endless challenges, but somehow always provided a warm, nurturing home. I've always admired her resilience, not just in her career, but as a mother. However, my relationship with my brother James is another story. We've never been close. James has always kept his distance, especially from Linda, only showing up when he needed something. So it wasn't a total shock when James called out of the blue to announce his engagement to Sarah. But what was surprising was that he asked Linda to foot the $50,000 bill for their extravagant wedding. I just want this day to be perfect, Mom. Sarah and I would really appreciate your help, James had said over the phone, his voice full of rehearsed sincerity that instantly put me on edge. That evening, I watched Linda as she thought over James' request, the soft glow from the table lamp casting shadows across her face. She always had a soft spot for him, hoping he would come around one day. Emily, I think this is a good opportunity to mend things. It's not just about the wedding. It's about reconnecting, Linda said, her voice hopeful, almost pleading for my agreement. But Mom, $50,000 is a lot. And honestly, when has James ever shown appreciation for everything you do? It feels like he's using you, I protested. She sighed, absently tracing the rim of her teacup. Maybe so, but I have to try. He's still my son, and maybe this will bridge the gap between us. Despite my protests, Linda decided to pay for the wedding. James was thrilled. Thank you, Mom. You won't regret this. Sarah and I are so grateful, he gushed over the phone. But as the days passed, I noticed something odd. No invitation to participate in the planning, no mention of wedding details. It felt like we were being kept at a distance. As the wedding day approached, Linda spent hours picking out the perfect outfit, her excitement tempered by nervous anticipation. I tried to share in her enthusiasm, but a nagging feeling told me we were headed for disappointment. On the day of the wedding, we arrived at the venue, a sprawling estate with gardens that looked straight out of a fairy tale. Mom, this place is incredible. James really went all out, I remarked, trying to keep things light. Linda smiled, her eyes taking in the beautiful surroundings. Let's hope it's a new beginning for all of us, she said softly. But as we approached the entrance, we were greeted not with smiles, but with tension. James and Sarah walked toward us, and I immediately noticed the annoyed look on James's face. You shouldn't have come, he said, his tone cold. What do you mean? We're family, and your mother paid for all of this, I said, gesturing to the lavish setup. Sarah crossed her arms and smirked. This day is about us, not some family drama. We don't want you two here making things uncomfortable. Linda, her voice trembling, reached out. I don't understand, James. Why would you invite us, have me pay for everything, and then turn us away at the door? James avoided her gaze, his words cutting deep. We thought you'd understand. This is about what Sarah and I want. Having older people here just kills the vibe. I could hardly believe what I was hearing. You're telling us to leave, after everything Mom has done for you? Sarah laughed, a cold, hollow sound. Look, it's nothing personal, but today needs to be perfect, and you being here isn't going to work for us. James's cold words hit harder than I expected. I felt my cheeks flush with anger, ready to fire back, but before I could speak, Linda gently tugged at my arm. Let's go, Emily. We don't need to make a scene. Her voice was quiet but resolute. As we turned to leave, I could hear the murmurs and whispers from the arriving guests. Linda's shoulders slumped, and I could see this moment breaking her heart. Once we were far enough from the venue, Linda stopped, her face pale under the afternoon sun. Maybe I was wrong about him, Emily. Maybe I've always been wrong. No, Mom, you were trying to do something good. James and Sarah are the ones at fault here. They'll realize what they've done. They'll feel the weight of this betrayal. Back in the car, as we drove away, I pulled out my phone and began typing messages to our relatives, explaining what had just happened. Within minutes, replies of shock and support flooded in. We're leaving right now, Aunt Maggie texted. This is unacceptable, replied Cousin Rob. News of James and Sarah's actions spread quickly, igniting outrage among our family and friends. Many left the celebration early, while others decided not to show up at all. By the time we arrived home, the quiet of the house was a stark contrast to the chaos unfolding at the wedding. Linda sat at the kitchen table, her eyes red but her voice steady. We did the right thing by leaving Emily. Now, let's see how they handle their perfect day turning into a disaster. As the sun set, the fallout from the wedding began to unfold, setting the stage for James and Sarah's reckoning. Just a few days later, James and Sarah showed up at my door, unannounced and furious. Their faces were tight with anger as they barged into the living room. "This is all your fault, Emily. You ruined our wedding day with your petty family drama." Sarah spat, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. "Ruined? You're the ones who uninvited your own family at the last minute," I countered, standing my ground despite the tension. James's voice was low and menacing. "You sent those texts, didn't you? Stirring everyone up to leave just to spite us." "It wasn't about spite. It was about respect, James. Something you and Sarah clearly know nothing about." Sarah narrowed her eyes and threatened. "You've made a big mistake, Emily. We're going to make sure everyone knows what a troublemaker you are." "Go ahead and try. Everyone saw how you treated Linda. They left because they couldn't support your behavior, not because of any texts," I replied calmly. A tense silence filled the room. Just then, my phone rang. I glanced at the caller ID. It was Mr. Henderson, the president of the company where James worked. I answered the call and put it on speaker, locking eyes with James and Sarah. "Emily, it's Mr. Henderson. I was at the wedding, and I couldn't help but notice what happened. Linda has always spoken so highly of her children. I was shocked at James' actions." James's face paled as Mr. Henderson continued. "James, I expected better from you. Linda has been a pillar of support for our community, and the way you treated her and your sister is troubling." "Mr. Henderson, I can explain," James began, his voice shaking, but Mr. Henderson cut him off. "There's no need. This incident has prompted me to review your recent project submissions. I'm afraid they don't meet our standards. Given today's revelations, I'm considering a more thorough investigation into your conduct and performance." As Mr. Henderson spoke, James seemed to shrink with each word. Sarah, who had been so full of anger, now stood in stunned silence. The call ended with Mr. Henderson promising swift action, and as the line went dead, the gravity of the situation sank in. "Looks like you've got bigger problems than a ruined wedding," I remarked dryly. James and Sarah left without another word, the threat in their exit far less potent than their arrival. As the door closed behind them, I felt a mixture of relief and sadness. James was my brother, after all, and watching him fall so far wasn't a victory, it was a tragedy. The next day, news spread that James had been suspended from work pending the outcome of the investigation. Rumors of Sarah's past indiscretions began to surface as well, adding fuel to the fire of their social downfall. Sitting with Linda that evening, we reflected on the events, not with satisfaction, but with a sober understanding of the cost of greed and pride. "Maybe they'll learn something from all this," Linda said softly, though there was a hint of hope in her voice. "Maybe," I agreed, though I had my doubts. James and Sarah had set themselves on a path that would be difficult to return from. But perhaps this fall from grace was the wake-up call they desperately needed. As the dust settled from the wedding disaster, the fallout for James and Sarah was only beginning. James was now under intense scrutiny at work, with every move closely monitored. The company president, Mr. Henderson, personally oversaw the review of James's projects, and it didn't take long for discrepancies to surface. Expenses that couldn't be justified, project reports that seemed more fiction than fact. Meanwhile, Sarah faced her own storm. Whispers of her infidelity, once dismissed as idle gossip, had erupted into a full-blown scandal. It turned out the man she'd been seeing wasn't just married, but a high-profile figure in the community. When his wife discovered the affair, she swiftly filed for divorce, naming Sarah as a co-respondent in a very public lawsuit. During this time, I stayed in close contact with Noah, my sharp-witted friend and lawyer, who had agreed to help us recover the wedding costs from James and Sarah. Together, we pored over receipts and contracts, building a solid case. It was tedious, often disheartening work, but Noah kept the mood light. "They really didn't know who they were messing with, did they, Emily?" Noah chuckled as we organized yet another batch of documents. "Your mom's generosity and your determination. That's a powerful combo." I smiled, grateful for his support. "I just want them to realize they can't treat people like this, not even their own family." With Noah's guidance, we filed a claim in small claims court. This wasn't just about the money, it was about accountability and showing James and Sarah that actions have consequences. The day of the court hearing arrived, but James and Sarah were notably absent, sending only their lawyer. After reviewing the evidence and hearing our testimony, the judge didn't hesitate. "I am ruling in favor of the plaintiff," he declared, awarding us not only the original amount but also additional damages for the emotional distress they had caused Linda. Word of the ruling spread quickly. Though I didn't take pleasure in their misfortune, a part of me felt that justice had been served. James's career was now in jeopardy, as the investigation at his work revealed more than just sloppy paperwork, it was outright fraud. Sarah, too, was unraveling, as the lawsuit drained her both financially and socially. Her affair had turned her into a pariah among her social circles, and the legal fees were just the beginning of her troubles. Back at home, Linda and I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, the court documents spread out before us. "It's over, Mom. They'll have to pay back every cent," I said, handing her the judgment papers. Linda took a deep breath, her gaze lingering on the document. "I hope they learn from this. I hope they find a way to turn their lives around." I nodded, knowing that while the legal battle was over, the emotional wounds would take longer to heal. We had stood up for ourselves, and that mattered, but the path to reconciliation, if it ever came, would be long and difficult. The days that followed were bittersweet. James and Sarah's world had come crashing down. After losing his job and facing the crushing weight of social ostracism, James found himself cut off from the very networks that once propelled him forward. Similarly, Sarah's reputation was shattered, leaving her isolated. In contrast, Linda received every penny back from the wedding expenses. The payment was a small consolation in light of her son's disgrace. But her relief was palpable, though tinged with a mother's grief that couldn't be easily soothed. As for me, the events reinforced the values Linda had instilled in me. We grew closer, our relationship deepened by the trials we had faced together. Our home became a sanctuary filled with love and support from friends who stood by us when the integrity of our family had been questioned. One afternoon, Linda and I sat in our garden, a place where we had often talked about life's complexities. The flowers were in full bloom, a reminder of how growth can follow the harshest storms. "Do you think they'll find their way back from this?" Linda asked, her eyes on the vibrant flowers. "I don't know, Mom," I replied, taking her hand. "But we did what's right. We protected our dignity, and we show that no amount of money can buy integrity." Linda nodded, her eyes reflecting both sadness and resolve. Maybe this is the wake-up call they needed. Maybe not. Either way, we need to focus on our own path, surrounded by people who love and respect us. Her words resonated deeply. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows over our peaceful refuge, I felt grateful for the strength and clarity that had emerged from the chaos. In the end, Kate had delivered a harsh but just sentence to James and Sarah. They were left to navigate a future marred by their choices, while Linda and I, bound by our shared experiences and renewed trust, looked forward to days filled with peace and the true warmth of a loving family. This ordeal had taught us that sometimes justice comes not just from a courtroom, but from the uncompromising force of integrity and familial bonds. And that brings our story to a close. What do you think? Should family always be forgiven, no matter what? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more content like this.